Law number 18 is the law of sacrifice. And the law of sacrifice says a leader must give up to go up. In fact, I can remember several years ago now doing a leadership lesson entitled, You Have to Give Up to Go Up. And into that lesson, I can remember my outline because it was very simple. I said, first of all, and it was about getting up to the top. And I said, first of all, you have to get up to go up. Because I know all kinds of people, they're still in bed. You know what I mean? They're still in bed. They haven't realized, you probably ought to get out of bed before you can be successful. You got to get up to go up. That's step number one, get out of bed. Enter in the arena of action. Take some initiative. Do something. Okay, you got to get up to go up. And after you get up to go up, after you do that, secondly, you got to grow up to go up. You got to grow up. I know people who have never matured. They're still talking about the same thing, doing the same thing. They've never developed like to. So if you want to get to the top, you not have to get up to go up. You got to grow up to go up. And then in the tape, I remember I talked thirdly in the leadership lesson about, well, you got to give up to go up. And that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment. And then the last thing I said is you need to gather up to grow up. You need to get your team together. If you really want to go to the top, you've got to gather up people because as I teach in the laws of teamwork, law number 4, the law of Mount Everest says, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. In other words, you've got to get a team around you, and you've got to get that team helping you to get to the top. So let's talk about the law of sacrifice. A few years ago, there was a tragedy at Mount Everest where a couple of guides got into a storm with a few of their people, and there were a few deaths. And I can remember a 60-minute interview that I watched. It was a very interesting interview because they were talking to one of the guides who, of course, lived, and they were talking about the tragedy. I think it was Mike Wallace, if I'm not mistaken, in that interview, and he asked a couple of questions that especially arrested my attention. One of the questions he asked was, why do you risk your life to take people to the top? And I remember the guide said, well, it's because that's my job. My job is to take people to the top. That's why they call me a guide. And Mike Wallace says, well, couldn't you get to the top by yourself without harm or injury? And oh yes, I could do that. But it's my job to take people to the top. And the guide kept coming back to Mike Wallace and said, it's my responsibility. That's who I am. I'm a guide. And when I listened, I thought, how true to a leader that is. It's our job as leaders to take people to the top. Mike Wallace continued that interview, and then he looked at me and said, I don't think it's worth the risk. I mean, after all, to risk your life or have people in your party that not make it to the top, he said, I don't think it's worth the risk. And then he looked at the guy and said, why do you risk your life to get to the top of the mountain? And I'll never forget, that guide looked at him, and when Mike Wallace asked that question, the guide is looking into his face like, I can't believe you would ask me that question. Why do I risk my life to get to the top? He looked at Mike Wallace and said, it's obvious to me that you've never been to the top of Mount Everest. It's obvious to me. You've never been to the top of the mountain. It's obvious that you've never been there. If you would have ever been to the top, you would never ask that question. When I think of that interview, I think of leaders. Once we have been to the top and see how glorious it is, what do we want to do? We want to go back down and we want to find some other people and say, I want you to take a trip with me. I'm going to show you things you have never seen. I'm going to give you experiences that you have never experienced. That's what leaders do. Leaders have been to the top and they want to take as many people with them to the top as they possibly can. Now, here's what I want you to understand. To get to the top, you've got to give up something. It was Emerson who said, for everything you gain, you must lose something. That's why I have in your workbook what I call the leadership pyramid. The leadership pyramid is a prime example of giving up to going up. Basically, the leadership pyramid says that when you enter an organization, I guess you got all kind of options left and right, but as you become a leader, and as you become a leader in that organization, the higher you go in this leadership pyramid, the less options you have. Now, I want to say that I teach this leadership pyramid all the time. I think that most leaders, and I think a lot of leaders in corporate America and in leadership organizations around the world, do not understand the leadership pyramid. For example, I run into leaders who all the time think that the higher they go, the more options they should have, the more perks they should have. I don't think so. I think the higher you go, the less options you have. I think that the greatest leaders are what I would call servant leaders. They're leaders who understand that they're a leader to make it better for the people. You're not a leader to make it better for yourself. Now, if you're a good leader, it will be better for you because you'll have the joy of taking people across the finish line. And there's no greater fulfillment and joy than that. So if you are a leader and you're taking people across the top, it's going to be very good. But what I want you to understand is this. You don't lead because of perks. In fact, what I have found is this. Most leaders, they become leaders because they like the perks of leadership. But most people have not counted the price of leadership. What you're going to have to give up, what you're going to pay. My dad taught me when I was just a kid. He said, John, pay now, play later. That's the way it works. And he said, if you don't pay on the front end, you don't get a play on the back end. In fact, he said, oh my, I'll never forget this. He said, John, the longer you wait to pay the price, the higher it becomes. So learn quickly, pay on the front end. And I'm saying to each one of us today, as we're teaching this principle, the law of sacrifice, what we've got to do is we've got to understand that we have to pay on the front end. There's a price to pay to be a leader. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. In fact, when I teach leadership, one of the things I'm most concerned about is, why do you want to become a leader? Do you want to become a leader because you think there are a lot of perks in it for you? Or do you want to become a leader because you want to add value to people and take them to a higher level than they could ever go on their own? So let's go to the workbook. Because there are 3 sacrifice statements that I want to make. Number 1, there is no success without sacrifice. Let's just start there. You say, John, what do you mean? What I mean is, there is no success without sacrifice. There's not an escalator waiting to take you to the top. Quit standing outside waiting for the chairlift to take you to the top. Nobody ever got to the top of a mountain and at the end of the day said, oh my goodness, how did I get here? Instead of saying, I just took a stroll and the next thing I knew, I was on top of this mountain. No. You can fall off the top by accident, but you can't roll to the top by accident. If you get to the top, it's because you gave up something. And let me tell you something that all experienced mountain climbers will tell you. Before they take that big trip to the top, the main question they ask themselves is, what are the essentials I must take with me? Because they know anything except essentials will be a detriment to keeping them from what that goal is. So when they get ready to go to the top, they don't back up a U-Haul truck and say, I'm going to throw this stuff in the truck. I may need it while I'm up there. No, they give up. They give up to go up. So there is no success without sacrifice. Number 2, the higher the level of leadership, the greater the sacrifice. That's a fact. The higher you go in your leadership, the more you'll give up. I remember thinking when I started off in my career, in my business to go to success, I remember thinking in the very beginning, boy, I was willing to do anything to get to the top. Of course it was. I didn't have to give up anything. Hey, when you have no money, it's not hard to give it up. When you have no position or reputation, it's not hard to give it up. You say, well, why was I so foolish as a youth? You weren't foolish as a youth. You didn't have anything. But as you grow higher, one of the reasons many leaders never get to the top is because as they go higher, they get more stuff. And they have to make these trade-off decisions that become very difficult for them. The third thing I want you to know about success is you have to give up to stay up. You not only have to give up to go up, once you get on top, you have to give it up. The reason most sports teams can do consecutive world championships is because after they win their first world championship, all the players go on the chicken banquet tour. And they spend the next year getting fat, telling everybody how they did it last year. And you don't reproduce yourself by telling your story. You reproduce yourself. You stay on top by giving up continually. About 5 years ago, I did a lesson that really fits this whole law of sacrifice. It was entitled 10 Trade-Offs Worth Making. And I was at a very important part of my own career where I was 50 years old. And I was going to have to make some major changes, and I was going to have to give up some major wonderful perks and things I had in my life if I wanted to go to the next level. And I can remember that day as I sat down at my desk with my legal pad and I began to look at the trade-offs. Trade-offs such as I was willing to give up affirmation. People tell me what a good job I was doing for accomplishment to get to a next level. I was willing to give up financial gain for future potential. I was willing to give up immediate pleasure for personal growth. I was willing to give up the quantity of life for quality of life. I was willing to give up security for significance. I was willing to give up acceptance for excellence. I was willing to give up addition for multiplication. I began to work through all these things I was willing to give up. And I can remember making the conscious decision to keep on going. But I also remember, as I looked at that list, I realized that the higher you go, the price gets higher. That's why many people get about 2/3 of the way up and never climb any higher. Law number 18 is the law of sacrifice.
Okay. The law of sacrifice. You know, when I read this, the first thing I thought about, you know, with us here in Shield Nation, what is something that we always talk about? P2P. Somebody tell me what that is. I know y'all know it. I gave you a hint, P2P.
Price to promise.
Price to promise. Who said that?
Juwan.
Who said that? Who? Juwan? Exactly. What price are you willing to pay in order to have the promise that's out there for us? And not everybody is willing to pay a price. For that price, it means making some sacrifices. He talked about trade-offs and things that you're willing to do, the sacrifices you have to make for the trade-offs. And so with this chapter, you know, effective leadership, it requires willingness to make those sacrifices. And leadership is not just about personal gains or privileges, but it's about serving others and focusing on the greater good. And so when I think about that, I think about some core things like key points on sacrifice is the price of leadership. True leaders, often they give up their rights. They give up their rights, their time, comfort, even personal aspirations just to fulfill their vision and serve the team or the organization. Sometimes you have to do that. The higher the level of leadership, then the greater the sacrifice. He talked about that. So as leaders rise in influence, the demands on their time, resources, and energy starts to increase, and the scope of their sacrifice grows accordingly. Sacrifice is an ongoing process. You know, if you just decide you want to do a 90-day run, that's a sacrifice. And you have to prepare your family for that sacrifice, for that 90-day run, and let them know, hey, you know, normally I can attend all of the soccer games. For the next 90 days, I'm not going to be able to do that. But, you know, maybe dad will be able to attend, or aunt so-and-so or uncle so-and-so is going to attend in my place because I'm on a 90-day run. You got to get buy-in from your family when you do that. So there are going to be some sacrifices. There are going to be some trade-offs that you have to make in order to make those things happen. Sacrifice brings growth, but it also brings legacy. So by giving up something of value, leaders also will gain respect, loyalty, and opportunities so that they can make a lasting impact. And I love the fact that he talked about the guide, the tragedy that happened on Mount Everest, and the guide that did survive. He said, "Why do you do what you do?" And he says, "Because as a guide, I take people to the top. As a leader, we want to take our team to the top." And he kept asking him that. And then he finally said, "Why do you risk your life to do that?" And he finally realized, obviously, you've never been to the top. So now I'm going to turn it around with Legal Shield. Why do we want you all to win? Because if you've ever been at the executive, senior director, and above level, the air is different. It's just totally different. Or better yet, let's go back to how many of y'all went to Riviera Maya? If you went last week, or you're just coming back from Riviera Maya, you're like, why do I want you to win? Because I want you to be on that trip next year. Because now you went, you saw what it was like, you experienced it. It was nice being waited on, not having to pull your wallet out or your credit card, not having to decide, do I have enough money to eat this, or are we going to have to settle for that? No, it's all inclusive. And you want your team, you want everybody to experience that. And so, that's a prime example of wanting other people to experience it, to so that they can experience it, and then they can share that with their family and their friends and their other team members to get them to start duplicating the same things that are necessary to move up in those areas. So I'm going to put a pin in it right there because I want this to be interactive. So I want to hear what resonated with you the most. What stood out for you? Put up your digital hand, or else I will voluntold you. All right, Jane.
That's okay.
Who was that called you the wrong name earlier? They
Who's she
like
talking to?
started something.
That's okay. No, you know
Jane.
what stood out to me was that reminder that the higher we go, the more we have to give up. And I live alone. I don't have to worry about asking family, but you still give up things. And I mean, that kind of excites me. I'm ready and willing to do whatever it takes, including giving up. So I think it's an exciting journey.
Absolutely. Jane, I can resonate with that too. I live alone. I don't have to worry about cooking. If I don't want to cook, I don't have to because it's just me. So if I want to starve, it's me.
Right.
I don't have to worry about somebody saying, well, why didn't you make the bed? It's my bed. I don't have to make it if I don't want to. It costs too much money for me to be doing all that cleaning when I can just do well here and hire somebody else to do the cleaning for me. So yes, that it has its perks, but there's still sacrifices that I make.
Mhm.
Because I might want to do, like, for example, this weekend, I really want to be on the master class, but I have to go to my Super Saturday because I have team members who are going to be there with their guests and their new team members. So I don't have the luxury of just saying, well, I'm not going, I'm going to stay home and do this. So that's the sacrifice that I make. Somebody doesn't have a way to get there. Sacrifice I make is, okay, if you're willing to go, I'll come by and pick you up. Those are things that we do as a leader. So thank you for your comments, Jane. Arnhem.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Arnhem.
So I had no idea that John C. Maxwell was going to talk about the Mount Everest. I actually, what's crazy is I just watched that movie the other day about Mount Everest, just this weekend. And so it's fresh in my mind. And I was thinking the same thing, like, why are they doing this? Why are they going to the top and bringing people up there? So just to give you a little bit of story, which I found really interesting, there was a guy on that trip, and it was his third time going up to the top. Now, he never made it to the peak those other two times. So that third time, the guide was saying, hey, we didn't make it. We got to go back down. It's bad weather coming. We have to go. And this guy, he was like, yo, I'm not going to make it back to this point again. I have to go now. And a guy looked at him and said, all right, turned around and decided to go up the mountain with him. They made it to the top, took pictures, he dropped the flag and everything. And the expression on this guy's face, he was so excited to make it up there after trying and failing, and finally getting up to the top. He was nothing but a teacher. He was working like odd jobs, 3 jobs, just to be able to make it up to Mount Everest. So that what he gave up was his life, just to plant a flag and show the kids that he had their flag to show them like they can do anything. And they actually said it in the movie, like, why are you going up there? Why, like, are you hitting this mountain? And people started sharing their why. And I think it's very similar in Legal Shield. Like, I've never seen any other organization where the first thing we talk about is, what is your why? Why are you doing this? When it gets tough, why are you going to keep going? So, the sacrifices are real. You have to give up something. And I'm on my 90-day run right now for my $100,000 ring. And I know it's sacrifice. It's sacrificing and doing house chores. It's sacrificing summertime with the children. There's always sacrifices. I'm willing to pay the price, but I really appreciate that particular John C. Maxwell clip that you showed. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments, Arnhem. And it's something about once you reach that, you make that sacrifice and you reach that goal, it's just a whole different feeling on the inside. I apologize, y'all, for the coughing. I'm still have some residual from whatever that was that John now has. But it's just something about it. You work and we hear about people who run for executive director or senior director and they miss it by 5 or they miss it by 10 premium dollars. And you would think that they would just say, oh, I'm done with this. But they get back on that horse immediately and they run for it. And we always tell people, you got to go through the fire to get there. But once you go through the fire and you get there, you look back and it's like, it is well worth it. I would do it again. And so it's a sacrifice, but life is all about choices and we get to make them. Thank you, Arnhem. Robert.
Good evening. From the perspective of somebody who becomes an associate, the first thing they have to give up is their old ideas. Moving from the W-2 to a 1099 mindset is huge. And they have to give that up, and it's not easy. I'm still struggling with that to an extent. And the further you go, you don't have the opportunity to just veg out at home. If you're going to go up, you've got to give up the TV or whatever in order to focus on the business and go up. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And I love the fact that you're so transparent that you still struggle with that. And sometimes it's difficult to go from a wage, when you a WG mentality to a 1099 mentality. And I used to hear sometimes people saying, oh, I sleep until I wake up, is that how, did you come into this business with the same work ethic that you have working at JOB? Because I couldn't do that. I had to be up at a certain time so I could get to work at a certain time and be on time. But if I put that same work ethic into my own business, how much further along would I be? Because the fact that we are 1099 and we work for ourselves, sometimes if we don't have some kind of discipline, we could find ourselves in a really bad situation because we're not taking our business serious. But it is a muscle that you have to work on, that you have to develop Nobody just walks out and says, I'm going to do this. You got to work on it. It takes time. That's why we always say it's so important to help a person get paid and promoted right away so that they can have that belief check, so that they can have some sort of success to give them that extra shot in the arm to want to take the next step. Because just like Martin Luther King said, you know, you may not be able to see the whole staircase, but if you see the first step, just take the first step. Just take the first step, and then you'll be willing to take the next step. So thank you, Robert, for your comments. Brenda, and the rest of y'all not going to get off. I'm going to make y'all talk too. All right, Brenda, and then Daria's next. She raised her hand. Brenda, you're on mute. I know what you're saying is so powerful.
What really stood out for me is that the higher up in leadership that you go, the less options that you have. And for whatever reason, you know, I can think of sacrifices, you know, the things you sacrifice, but this is just different. You know, the less options that you have. And, you know, we're programmed in our schooling to be an employee. So like Robert said, you take the average person, you know, the W-2, they don't really show up for themselves. They show up to the employer, and for this mentality of, you know, to have money, but you really don't have anything because you're basically a slave. For me, most of my life, I was entrepreneur in that I worked for myself. If I did not give a golf lesson, I didn't eat. Okay. So I just thought it was really interesting because yeah, I think I know about the sacrifices you make, but wow, you really, you know, lose the options. And I think it's challenging. I mean, I so admire everyone on here that has a team and how you all have done it. And gosh, it sure isn't easy because the hardest thing to do in life is to work with people, especially people that's been programmed to be an employee. And, you know, so I admire everybody on here that has the teams, you're the leaders, and it is definitely a different world for sure. And I can't say I'm the leader in that arena because I do not have a team and I've not applied myself either. But it's a great chapter, and guess what? You become who you surround with 5 people. So I got great people that I surround myself with to, you know, be different, to become the leader. And you know what? You have to lead yourself first. And up to this point, I'm not leading myself the way I should be. So technically, I'm not ready for a team. That's the way I look at it. I got a lot of more work to do on Brenda before I can even think about bringing an associate on. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you, Brenda. But you know, I would offer a suggestion that we can say, I'm not ready, I'm not this, I'm not that. I got to get this in order. I got to get this situated right here first before I do that. I gotta before. But sometimes, you know, you have to leap and grow your wings on the way down. Because I bet you your mindset would be completely different if you were able to leverage yourself. Because you were the golf instructor, you just said, if you didn't do a golf lesson, you didn't eat. Well, you're the only asset in this equation right now. And when your asset ain't at work, you ain't making no money. I said asset, y'all. And so you don't want to be the only asset in the equation. So just by leveraging yourself and by having, it doesn't mean that you have to have, go out there and recruit 50 people. You may just have one or two people. And together you all are growing together and you're starting to lead them. Your mindset will change completely because now you have that leverage as well. So I would offer that as a suggestion to think, did she disappear?
Uh-uh.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
here.
there you are. Okay, you took your hand down, you disappeared. I was like, where'd you go? So, yeah, so I would say think about that, consider that, because we can be around as many people as we want to, who are pouring into us, but, they can keep pouring into us. But I think we talked about it on this call, or it might have been my 8 o'clock call about knowledge. Knowledge is power, but only if it's applied.
Glad.
And so we want to take everything we're learning and put it to good use so that you can have that leverage, because you don't want to be the only one in the equation, especially if you're doing this full time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Thank you, Teresa.
okay. Thank you, Brenda. All right, Daria, and
Yeah.
then Duran.
So leaders, when they're like we're leading a movement in justice for all, and I believe that it hinges on your humanity because we're all, like Brenda said, we're all constantly evolving, and to be a leader, some of the qualities I believe first, and it starts with you. You have to be kind to yourself in order to be kind to others.
yeah.
You have to be responsible because not everybody's responsible. Like, for instance, I can't call up my friend and say, oh, can I borrow $5,000? I don't have, some of those friends I don't have. I may have like two or three, right? So you have to be responsible. You have to be committed, convicted, and approachable. So I think there's certain qualities that lend to a leader first, but starting with you, because you got to lead yourself first in order to lead others, that makes people want to follow you, right? Because again, if we don't take the initiative to lead ourselves, somebody else will lead us. So I believe that is a constant, we have to do a constant assessment. And also the words, how we speak to ourselves is important. So that
Mhm.
brought up Teresa is very important because again, words have power because whatever we speak, we cannot retract back. So when we're talking, we're actually talking to ourselves, but we're reflecting outward. So that is definitely an important, and things will you start to evolve and start to fall in place because people start to see certain these qualities and like, oh, it's that it factor that everybody talks about. And if some people are born with it, some of us we have to cultivate it, and that's okay, right? So, but I enjoy this. I have nothing better else to do. Like you said, Teresa, I'm single, so I don't have to worry about cooking, cleaning, and none of that stuff. And I can just commit myself to doing what I need to do to move, to create the legacy for my family. So I'm excited about what's to come.
Absolutely, Daria. And you know what? You're right about that self-talk. That self-talk is real because it boomerangs right back to you, good or bad. So we have to be careful. Death and life is in the power of the tongue. That's not me saying that, that's scripture. So we have to be careful what we put out there in the atmosphere. If you're going to put something out there, then you want to put something out there positive that's going to boomerang right back to you, first and foremost. And then even though, we are all single, that can also be a detriment to us as well in terms of us running our business because we have all this time. I have to tell myself, shut it down, because if you don't rest, if you don't take a self-care day, you're going to run yourself into the ground. You're not going to be of value to anyone if you don't take some time for Teresa. And so, that's something I constantly do. And on Sundays is my day of rest. I do the church thing. I come home, put on pajamas if I want to, and just chill, Netflix and chill or whatever until 5 o'clock. Then I'll do Legal Shield from 5 to about 8. and then I'm chilling the rest of the time. Now, Monday through Saturday, it's on and popping. But I have to shut things down because I gotta have that time to regroup and refuel myself. So thank you. Deron, did we
Yeah,
lose?
I got bumped.
There you go.
I'm back. All right, guys. Great comments. I just wanted to share something with everyone, especially Brenda. We just had a
Can you
mastermind
guys hear
call.
him? He sounds a
Yes.
little low to
Not
me.
very
How
well.
about me? How about now? Can you hear me better now, guys? Can you hear me
A
a little
little
better?
bit.
I'll
A
try to
little
stay
bit.
closer. I know we've been having storms around us, so I don't know if it's my internet.
Okay.
So this morning we had a mastermind call earlier, and we had one of our young ladies on the call, Brenda, who made pretty much that same comment. But we always feature, we call her the captain. She won 4 state championships in high school in basketball. And she talks about how well she was in basketball, but she struggles with her Legal Shield business. And we just pointed out, we said, you just practice more layups than you did in Legal Shield. That's all. So I get up early now. I commit myself to getting up to learning our system, to really working it. And then we have another mentor on the call who says, don't put pressure on yourself, put pressure on the system. Let the system work for you. And one of the things that I was having challenges with was identifying who I am. So that's the biggest thing. When we don't know who we are, we're all over the place. We have to start finding out who we are and build that confidence within inside. It's an inside job. We robbed the vault, and this is our 4th year reading Think and Grow Rich straight. And once a week, I sit down and answer these 61 questions and the self-analysis test questions about myself. And then anything I need to ask someone about that knows me, I ask them for their input because self-evaluation is so key. It's so key to be able to do this. So just keep going because I know Cliff Malloy always says this too. Competency leads to confidence because once we know what we're doing and we know what track we're on, we can run. So this simplify some things. Just take a couple of things, and you are a leader because you're showing up here every day. You're winning. We're winning.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can't make the calls. We had a son who had tonsils and adenoids out, couldn't make certain things, but we understand that life happens. But we're committed to our business, but we're also committed to our lives too. Whether you have a family or not, you know, you have to put things in proper perspective. And we're here, guys. Excited for everybody's future. Can't wait to see everybody over the top. Can't wait to see everyone over the top because we already know the bottom's way too crowded. Back over to you guys.
Good comments. Thank you, Deron. Jawan.
Yes, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. You know, to go back to the question you asked, what resonated most with me was the question, or how the gentleman responded to the question. Like, the response was, you must not have been up to the top of Everest, right? You must not have been there. Because if you've been there, you wouldn't ask why make the climb and why take people with you. And as I was thinking about that, I've thought about, you know, how important it is to attend big events, how important it is to get around individuals who have, you know, ring levels that's 250, 500, a million, to avail yourself of those individuals as much as possible. Because, yeah, you get the training and yes, you get the how to's, but when you hear about the lifestyles, when you hear about how they're living, when you hear, like, we all know money isn't everything, but it's a solve to a lot of things, right? I remember when Rip Mason first, you know, you mentioned his name, reminded me of listening to him speak and how he travels and the places he
Mm-hmm.
frequents. And, you know, I remember one of the stories how he said he goes to the hotel room. Guy doesn't pick out the suits. The suits are already prearranged, right? He doesn't have to even, it's not even a thought process, right? To be able to go to certain restaurants and get invited certain places, right? That's so absolutely important because if you have not been around it, you have to get around it because sometimes you don't know what you're missing. You know, for me personally, every 2 to 3 years, there's a very, very, very wealthy neighborhood in the state of Michigan that I will purposely go to. And I may not ever buy a home with, a bowling alley and an aquarium and all these different things and all. It might not be, but when I walked through there and said, "My gosh, man, people are this how you doing it?" This, this is what it looks like for you to, walked into a couple homes where they had salon on one side in the basement for the wife, and another salon for her friends, and then a barber shop on one side, and another barber, and then a barber shop area for the husband. And then you walked into another room, and it was like a boardroom. And I ain't talking about some little small room with a couple chairs and a screen. It was like a boardroom. And to see like this is how this gentleman is getting down. Like this, you got to do that for yourself because then you don't know why, right? And I think about that. I think about the responsibility that we all have to become executive directors because people need to see it. People need to see it. People need to see more of us at ED, um, at exec director. I mean, you really are earning more than 80% of the US population. And I can tell you, the only reason why I'm running as hard as I am as an executive director is because I'm not happy with my ring level. I want to get to that $250,000 ring. So I'm about to put in the effort. But man, trust me, at an ED, you are going to be averaging just under 6 figures. You really are, as long as you're doing things the right way. Let's just put it that way. You'll be earning, and people need to see that. Right? They need to know that it's possible. They need to see that lifestyle. I can tell you that my stress level has gone down considerably since I started qualifying executive director on a regular basis. Because it's a different feeling knowing that things are getting paid whether you roll out of bed and go to work or not. Right? So I thought about that, and how we need to show people what Mount Everest looks like in PPL Assign Legal Shield. And you have to avail yourself of those things if you have not experienced those things. You gotta put yourself in spaces. Like Maui messed me up. I didn't go to the last trip, but I went to Maui, and I did not look at my car the same. I did not look at my neighborhood the same. I did not look at the food I ate the same, the people around me the same, because that trip out in Maui. Like being around people, there were families in Maui, man. The way we take our kids to the park, that's how they take their kids to Maui. Like it was no thing. This is what we do. It's like, going to the park. I was like, oh my God. And I know how much the trip costs. You know what I mean? So you gotta do that. The other thing that I'm thinking about as I listen, and I couldn't help but to respond to Ms. Brenda Daniels. And what I will say to you, Ms. Daniels, is this. Um, Birthing a team, quote unquote, so to speak, is like having a child. And you will not find a single parent on the planet Earth that will tell you that they knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing. Because every child behaves differently. Every child has a different personality. Every child moves differently, the whole 9 yards. I mean, yeah, the good book does give us a lot of wisdom and knowledge. There's a business model, just like we got the PAVE business model here. But the bottom line is you're never going to be, quote unquote, ready for everything that is involved in it. But if you have the desire to serve, if you are willing to learn and be humble, if you're willing to do the things that are required to be successful, then I have faith, just like you watch a parent that is, in love with their children, you have faith that parent's going to figure it out, right? When they're willing to sacrifice and do the things. And so that's what I would share with you. Don't be afraid to build team. You are surrounded by family, right? And, the way it used to be in our society is there was never a household to raise a child anyway. It was the village, right? The village raised. There was a time where children could run up and down the street and go and be gone for 2 and 3 hours at a time. We not stress out about that in this country. Unfortunately, it's not the way it used to be in a lot of places, but it takes a village to raise a child, and you're part of a phenomenal village, right? Because we still have that village here. So you go out there and you build that team, you introduce them to the village, and you do the thing that is required to be responsible to make sure that new associate grows and prospers and has everything they need to do, just like you would as a child, and understand you're not going to have all the answers, but as long as you have the determination and tenacity and a willingness to be responsible for it, that new associate, you're going to be fine. So you go out there and a year next time, this year, next year, this time, I want to see you with a huge team walking across that stage, being recognized as one of our newest ring earners. So I wanted to plant that seed with you, Ms. Daniels.
Good stuff. Thank you, Juwan. And we'll end with Patty.
Hi, mine is short. In the applying the law of sacrifice on page 231, it's well, I don't know, everybody's got different books, but the third thing mentioned, it just says one of the most harmful mindsets of leaders is what I call destination disease, and the idea that they
Oh,
can sacrifice for a season and then arrive, and that that puts you at risk of you stop sacrificing because somehow you think you're there. And I correlate that again. Some people know I was raised by teachers, and they were older when they had me, and were told they weren't going to have kids. So I got the benefit of a lot of wisdom from an aging family because they were the babies of their family. And even on my thesis in my nursing, on my dedication, and this is years ago, so I'm paraphrasing, but it had to do with really paying attention to the beauty of the journey, not the destination. And it was exactly those, specific words, because I'm a lifelong learner. There's nothing that irritates me more, which is someone who says, well, I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm 70, my head is full of information, I don't need to know anything else. And that just saddens me because, my relatives lived into their 90s and 100s. And that's a blessing when you still have your mind. And there was not a day that my relatives did not read or did not share some wisdom and insight with others. And so the teaching and the mentoring is so important. And the harmful mindset, I just really, that spoke to me. Probably out of this whole chapter, that spoke to me the most. And, they talk about Condoleezza Rice and, all the people that looked ahead and did something else that really set their soul on fire, and just looking ahead, not feeling like, okay, I'm here, I'll just stay right here. So anyway, and with Juwan, one of my favorite words, of course, is tenacity, which he mentioned in his comment. So, and that's it. And for Brenda, yes, it's hurting cats. I did not like middle management in healthcare, because you start realizing who's there for paychecks as opposed to caring for patients as a heartfelt service to others. And you try to manage people that have a mindset of, give me the paycheck, just pay me for my time. And they're very hard I don't like management. I like leadership because of that. I just, I'm not there to change them. There's people that don't want to be changed, and that's their choice. But I'd rather surround myself with leaders and always be the least educated in the room. When you say put yourself in a room with people that, what are you going to learn if you're at the top of the heap in a room? There's no benefit in that. So I like to be the least of whatever it is and just take in the wealth of knowledge around me. So anyway, and I have found that in Legal Shield, and it's one of the big reasons I was really drawn to the company. So that's it. Probably longer than I meant, but anyway.
that's okay. Great comments, Patty. You're right. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then what are you learning? So when you find that you're in that situation, it's time to move to another room so that you can learn more. And that's what we want to continue to do, to continue to grow. So your homework assignment is, I'm not sure what page it is in your book, but under the discussion questions, It's number 4. It says, give an example of something you had to give up in order to reach a goal you set for yourself. Give an example. So be thinking of that. And next week, when we come back, before we go into the next chapter, you can share. Give an example of something you had to give up in order to reach a goal you set for yourself. So with that, you know, a key takeaway for tonight's lesson is leadership is a journey that demands consistent selflessness and commitment. You know, it's all about sacrificing personal gain for the benefit of the team. And so, you know, John C. Maxwell, I love how he started up. He says, you got to get up to go up, which means you got to get out of bed. You got to grow up to go up. You know, we can't keep talking about what happened in the past. We got to create new stories. Number 3, we got to give up to grow up. And number 5, we have to gather up to grow up. So let's be thinking about something that we had to do to make a sacrifice to reach a goal and share that next week. We could take a few people can share that next week before we go into the next lesson. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation today. I certainly have enjoyed communicating with you and learning from you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this evening with you. So we'll see everybody back here next week. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank
you.
Have a
Bye,
dandy
everybody.
week. Bye.